Hey, everybody. We're going to get started here in a couple minutes, just letting people file in. I hope everybody's week is going well. We're coming to you live from Salt Lake City at Permissionless. So really excited to get started here in a couple minutes. Is anybody here also in Salt Lake City this week? Give a thumbs up in the chat if you are, because I would be happy to meet up. I'm going to be at the conference and a couple other parallel events today. So. Okay, we got one clap. I'm guessing that doesn't mean that you're in Salt Lake City, but that's okay. We'll get started here in probably a couple minutes, just letting a couple more people file in. And we've got Albert already here. So in a minute or two, we'll get started.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Albert. It's great to have you join.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to treat this as a natural, free-flowing conversation and just, talk about Gen layer, the synchronicities, data access, and really, try to dig into the Gen layer stack, some of the use cases, stuff with the prediction market, different
Awesome.
ideas that you have, stuff with the CLI, maybe talk about the simulator a little bit, GenLayer JS, just some of the core concepts here in a minute. And really, the goal is just to get people really excited about GenLayer because it is a really cool project. It is pretty unique in the space, and it has a lot of really cool, unique ideas. So I'm really excited to talk about it and have everybody learn on the call.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we really, like education is such an important component, right? And it takes effort and it's difficult, right? Like we're talking about very interesting technologies, like crypto and the AI and identity, so much stuff, right? And it's really it's difficult to get the message across. So it's important that you guys are doing this education effort very much.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the messaging is everything, right? I mean, you can write the best book in the world, but nobody reads it.
Right.
It's just kind of a miss, right? So, I mean, that's the same thing with technology. It's like some of the best ideas that happened over the last few decades were ultimately misses because of the communication. So, the more we can communicate about technology and get people excited about it, and have them realize that this isn't just possible; it's something that can actually really help people and change the way we think about things. It's major. So, um, we have some people here. We can let them keep filing in, but we can get started. So, yeah, I mean, welcome everybody to this really exciting Twitter Spaces. I've been really looking forward to this all week, and we're featuring our new partner, Gen Layer, who's going to be building on top of the Autonomous network here pretty soon. So, to get started, Autonomous is building the foundation layer for AI 3.0. And we're going to be providing a hyper scalable, decentralized AI infrastructure stack solution. Our network is going to be combining high throughput, permanent distributed storage, data availability, and modular execution to enable the development and deployment of advanced AI applications and on-chain agents. So with that said, today we're thrilled to introduce GenLayer, which we found and we had seen previously a few months ago, and we're really excited about it. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to partner with these guys. Really innovative project that really aligns with our vision about a future of decentralized AI. Giving ownership back to individuals and decentralizing control. And Genlayer's really pioneering this with the concept of these intelligent contracts, which we think is definitely a step order advanced beyond traditional smart contracts. So we really think these intelligent contracts, leveraging LLMs, and I'm sure everybody on the call has used LLMs extensively in the last 2 years. How can we combine that to access and process internet knowledge and make really good decisions in a decentralized manner? So with that said, I'm really pleased to introduce Albert, who's a co-founder of GenLayer. So Albert, welcome. If you want, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and then we can start to dig into some of these ideas and see where the conversation takes us.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, maybe I'll start with a bit of background, right? So personally, my background is in computer science. I've been in the space for quite a while, since 2013. I've been in multiple projects. Two of them were L1s, NEM and Radix DLT. As I've been in other projects as well, such as but the Badger DAO, and I was the co-founder and CEO at StakeHound, which was the first liquid staking solution. Now, like we've seen what is possible through these large language models, right? Like we're talking about AI, we're talking about LLMs, right? For those that don't really understand what LLMs are, right? You can think about it like, it's like a digital brain, right? So it's essentially imagine a very big spreadsheet that is capable of, you send it, a sentence and it outputs something else that makes sense from that sentence. I'm assuming that all of you have used ChatGPT, right? So you more or less understand what the concept of this is. Couple years ago, we started looking into this when it came out, ChatGPT, and we were completely fascinated by what's possible by it. Right? You basically have a black box that you can send it something and it responds, and it can be responding very intelligently. It can even be responding code, right? And when we discovered this, when we saw that okay, you can actually have an LLM spin out code and tell you how to code something, right? We started to explore all the different possibilities that this enables, right? What can we do if we basically have, a piece of software that is capable
Did we lose Albert? Can anybody hear him? Thumbs down if you
Did
guys
you?
can't hear him.
I see. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay. I think it's just like the screen goes off and then it stops. Am I okay
Gotcha.
now?
Yeah, you're good. Keep
I
going.
don't know how to make it like. Yeah, all right. Okay, so essentially what we're talking about here is, look, there's thousands of blockchains out there, right? But the reality is that in general they have the same type of features, right? They have some limitations, such as blockchains can't connect to the internet. That's why we have oracles, right? And that blockchains can't actually make decisions on themselves. So, like, you think about smart contracts, and smart contracts are not smart. They're pretty dumb, right? They just, they run code and that's it. What we're doing is we're creating the first intelligent blockchain. We say that because our blockchain, essentially, the consensus algorithm is using artificial intelligence. That means that each validator is connected to a different LLM to essentially reach consensus agreements on non-deterministic outputs, right? What this means is that we can have smart contracts that can natively connect to the internet without any oracle whatsoever, and that can make decisions such as processing natural language, understanding this natural language or even code, and then making decisions that are basically an aggregated output from multiple different validators, each one of them running a different large language model. So it's a completely different type of architecture. And with this, the goal is, can we, open up the design space for decentralized applications? Because again, like we've seen basically that for the last few years, since like 2018, 19, right? Everything is pretty much the same. Like right now, like everything is just, you open a new L1 or a new L2, and there's just, a flock of the same applications copy pasted from other protocols, right? We want to see how can we really enable new types of decentralized protocols.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, when I was reading through your white paper, and I definitely encourage everybody on the call to first, take a look at GenLayer's website, because it's really awesome. Links to the GenLayer simulator and some ways to get started with the CLI. But yeah, you touched on this point of the consensus mechanism being this optimistic democracy, where if one LLM might hallucinate, then the likelihood of the others that are being used as multiple validators to interpret the data would be able to catch that hallucination. So that was something that I think that, when people were initially reading it, they were like, using large language models that are prone to hallucination for something that's supposed to be precise, like consensus, led to some skepticism. So,
yeah, it's a very big jump, right? If you think about it, like all blockchains in general, right? They all have been completely deterministic, right? So again, deterministic just means that for a given input you will have the same output. Well, like a given another output, right? But it doesn't change. Yes. This is a big difference, right? When you're looking at an LLM, every time that you ask an LLM, you're getting a different response, right? It's a stochastic system, right? But probabilities, yes. And well, how do you bridge that gap? How do you make it so that you can, from a blockchain, connect to an LLM? There's different approaches to this, right? One of them is called proof of inference, which is, hey, what happens if you have a single LLM and then you do the evaluation, right? Like the thinking of the LLM was done correctly. The problem that we see with that approach is that then you're kind of centralizing the decision making on a single model, right? And that basically means that, well, if this model is wrong, you will get a wrong output, and that's not good, right? If there's a way to attack the model, prompt injection is called, then you can attack the application. That's not good either, right? So our approach is essentially the wisdom of the crowds. Can we get a bunch of different models to agree? And if in a majority vote they agree that the output is correct, then it's correct. We're not trying to verify that the thinking was done correctly. We're trying to allow them to agree on anything that they want, as long as as they can agree, right? Which is the Tianjin bit. Does that make sense?
it does. Yeah. That gets into the whole appeals process, and that's kind of what you're touching on. Is there anything else you wanted to maybe mention about the appeals process? Because it is kind of it is a unique aspect of GenLayer.
So, ultimately, it's based on this thing called the jury theorem, right? Which is, instead of having a single judge deciding your fate, what you want to have is you want to have a bunch of judges, and they all together will get a better answer than a single judge, right? If this judge, slept bad, and didn't eat well and so on, maybe it will be 80% correct, right? You don't want that, right? you want multiple of them to agree on something. And then the appeal process is, okay, even if the 5 judges that we're selecting at random for the first iteration of the transaction, if you don't like that, you can still appeal to then bring more validators to the mix, right? So ultimately, if you appeal and appeal and appeal, then you have the entire network verifying your transaction. That's more expensive, right? But you can do that. And that gives you the best possible answer, because that's how the whole network has agreed on a majority on a specific output.
Right.
So the appeals require some bonds, and it's a bit more complicated, but essentially that's the idea, right? If you disagree, it's like a court system. You can essentially raise the flag and just go to a higher court and then complain there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think let's take a step back from the appeals process and maybe talk a little bit about the intelligent contracts, because this is a big part of GenLayer, and let's break it down for the people on the show here. How did you initially think about smart contracts, and how did you lead yourself to thinking about intelligent contracts as being this key innovation, and what possibilities they could potentially unlock for GenLayer? Like, what do they do? What can they do and unlock that smart contracts are inflexible and incapable of doing?
Right. So, when you're trying to build a smart contract, right, that's just code, right? So you have Solidity, you have Rust, there's different approaches to writing smart contracts, right? They have some limitations. One of them, which is not obvious, is that they can't connect to the internet, right? We're very used to writing software and things, and your phone is connected to the internet all the time, right? What can you do with your phone when it doesn't have internet? Much less, right? So why don't smart contracts have connectivity to the internet? And the reason is basically because the blockchains are, as I said before, deterministic, right? But when you're going to the internet, every time that you search for a website, you will get a different website. The cookie has changed, or the content has changed, or whatever it is, right? So that impossibility to make sure that the website is always responding the same is what makes smart contracts not be able to connect to the internet, right? That's why they need oracles. And oracles are enabling tons of use cases, right? Thanks to oracles, for example, you have, perpetuals and lending and a bunch of other things, right? But oracles are very limited too. Very expensive. You can only deal with price data, right? And stuff like that. So the question is, what if you have smart contracts that can natively connect to the internet, right? So then you would be able to, for example, let's go back to the perpetuals use case, right? Which is you could do perpetuals on anything. You want to do collectibles, you can do perpetual markets on collectibles, or you can do insurance on, the weather conditions, or you can do, prediction markets on basically anything, like peer-to-peer betting on literally anything that you want, as long as the intelligent contract can go out to the internet and come back with a decision, basically, right? So this enables for example, decentralized autonomous organizations. So if you look at it, like DAOs are super powerful, right? I think many of us actually were totally in love with DAOs when they came out, right? Until 2014, 2015, 2016. The problem is that, right now they're not real DAOs. Right now they're just a multi-sig. There's just a bunch of people behind the multi-sig listening to what people are voting on Snapshot and doing that, right? But what happens if you have a contract, an intelligent contract, capable of going to Snapshot, understanding the proposals and the votes and the weights, and then making a decision without any human in the loop at all? Making the decisions completely autonomous, a truly unstoppable, decentralized autonomous organization, right? So this really, really changes things, to be honest, right? So you can do anything from here. You can do generative memes, and you can do market makers that adjust their fee depending on the liquidity of a centralized exchange, for example, right? Or a stable coin that can change its properties depending on the policies of the central bank. You can do digital identity as well, where it's going. I think here's where Autonomous has one of these use cases that I think will be very much in line, which is, can we essentially create a system for digital identity where basically you're mixing social information with cryptographic information, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And you're touching on what I wanted us to dig into prediction markets. I mean, I think a lot of people on the call, and maybe some of you have participated in this, using Polymarket for betting on, the election, betting on the recession, betting on something that's happening. It seems like it's like a bread and butter situation where it seems like these intelligent contracts and the flexibility they provide really lend themselves very well to prediction markets and a lot of other things in crypto that are more flexible or prone to change. So, I mean, where do you think prediction markets are headed? I mean, it seems like, building with GenLayer and, building a prediction market utilizing aspects of GenLayer might be something that could feasibly happen in the near future. I'm curious what you think. Can everybody hear me? Yes, no? Yeah, the autonomous host can hear me, but I can't hear Albert. Just approved Albert to speak. Yeah, no worries. Did you hear my question and some of my thoughts around the
No,
poly market?
I think you need to repeat that.
Okay. Okay, I'll do a TLDR for our friends on the
Well,
show.
apologies.
No worries, Albert. No, I'm just curious where you think prediction markets are headed. I mean, a lot of us have participated in like poly market and messing around with stuff like that. It seems like these intelligent contracts are really built, with the ability to be able to, you could build something more natively on
Mhm.
a market like that. Like, where do you think that's heading?
I think that it's going to be much, much more open, right? Means that anybody will be able to create prediction markets. Anybody will be able to create prediction markets on many more things. So right now, there's a very big limitation, which is that the resolution needs to be or totally deterministic, meaning, for example, just numbers, right? Or the resolution needs to be managed by humans. Humans are slow. Humans, disagree and they have misunderstandings on what's happening, right? Did the ETF get approved or not, right? So the problem here is that right now, all this human intervention essentially is an overhead. That means that every single market that's being resolved, can be costing whatever, hundreds, even thousands of dollars to resolve properly, right? That's really expensive. But if you want to make, say, for example, an insurance on flight, for example, well, that's a sort of prediction market. You're spending $100, $300 on a flight, right? You can't be spending, hundreds of dollars to resolve the insurance, right? Prediction markets, insurance is just different type of options, basically, right? And what this means is that with intelligent contracts, you're going to be able to natively go out to the internet and fetch some information, which is just a few lines of code. So that takes the price of resolving a prediction market from tens or hundreds or thousands of dollars down to less than $1, right? And this means more prediction markets, more products like this, and the more products there are, the more infrastructure that gets created, and the more you can have more layers of complexity that add value to what's actually being built there, right? So, for example, one of these cases is insurance, right? Right now, there's no proper insurance on chain. Why? Because it's managed by, DAOs, right? Can we essentially have insurance on slashing? Why not? Can we have insurance for bigger or smaller things, right? We will be able to do that when we have this infrastructure in place. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
more openness, right?
Yeah, more openness, more flexibility. I mean, we're seeing the same parallel right now with agentics in the AI space. We're seeing more platforms that are opening up that are just allowing for agent-based platforms to be built and agents that are more flexible that have access to the internet. I mean, this year, Perplexity existed and people were using it last year, but Perplexity's really blown up more with the ability to have references. And so I really think this year, next year, we're going to be seeing like, I was at the deAI conference yesterday in SLC, and a big core focus for a lot of people were like agent marketplaces, being able to sell, having these sort of, and then that ties in perfectly with this notion of intelligent contracts, where if you have agents or agentic platforms working with intelligent contracts, there's additional flexibility there, which leads to better insights, better information, better recommendation systems, stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm curious what you think about, this idea of agent platforms. I know we weren't planning on talking about that, but are you excited about
No, yeah,
agentics
absolutely.
and excited about that? Yeah.
So there's different two thoughts there, right? One, I would like to go back to your point on, like, how did you actually come back like with the idea for GenLayer, right? And it actually relates very much to autonomous, which is, if you think about it, why is there no open database that essentially people can throw in information and the database is capable of verifying the information and storing the information if it deems it correct, valuable, verified, right? You see? Why can't we have like a totally open Wikipedia where people can throw in information and the network itself goes and verifies that information? So GenLayer is essentially this consensus that is capable of taking in the data, verifying the data, and then it needs to store it somewhere, and it can store it in an autonomous, right? So that's just one highlight on like where we actually came from. The other one,
Sure.
and like on the question for the agents, right? We've actually been working on agents for now almost 2 years, right? We think that the future is going to be full of them, right? Like, really, my opinion is like probably by first quarter of next year, OpenAI is going to be releasing a product to just have an agent that's working 24/7 for you, whatever. Pay $50 a month, get an agent that's just like doing your stuff, and do something, comes back a few hours later, it's done whatever you need it to do, right? And I think there's going to be like many, well, like billions and billions of agents. The question for me is, well, where is the value there, right? Is the value on the code that is being run by the agents, right? The way I look at it, code is very cheap right now. Anybody can write code just with an agent, right? So I don't see that the value will stay there. The value will be for sure in data, right? That's one thing that is very difficult. If you can essentially isolate the data in a way that can be, like capturing value, that's one. And the other thing where I think the value will really accrue is on the infrastructure, not really the physical infrastructure, which I think will be commoditized, although extremely used, but actually from the Zeller's perspective is, can we build a synthetic jurisdiction, imagine like a nation state, for agents to be able to do commerce? So when you have your agent and I have my agent, right? You have your AGI, I have my AGI, right? Are they going to be dealing with each other? If they want to trade something, are they going to be hiring lawyers? Very expensive, very slow, right? Are they going to be just trusting smart contracts that can only run code and can't even connect to the internet? I think that's too limited, right? So the way we look at GenLayer from the point of view of these agentic systems is GenLayer is essentially a synthetic jurisdiction that can have regulations, can even have taxes or insurance, can have tons of different, aspects of any commerce network so that these agents can deal with each other, right? And that's really like the long-term vision, which is how do we enable this? How do we enable AI to AI commerce in a way that it really, as well allows humans to take part of that, right? So, yeah, all these decentralized protocols that we can enable, we think that it's going to be first humans building them, and then people are going to be able to capitalize on those when AIs are going to be using them to trade.
Right. Yeah. I mean, somebody had mentioned yesterday at the deAI conference that I said something like, "Oh, before I was using agents or agents that I had custom built for doing trades on different DeFi platforms, I was doing maybe 10 trades a day, 20 trades a day. Now, with some custom built scripts and these agents that I've built in house, I can do 300 trades a day, 400 trades a day. As we get to a point where it seems like, I mean, train of thought reasoning is getting us closer to AGI, and there's obviously a lot of open thoughts about, are there groups that have reached AGI internally? There was
Yeah.
always the thought that OpenAI had already achieved AGI internally, and there was a reason why people were leaving. There are also, thoughts around, well, it's becoming more for profit. That's a reason why people are leaving the company. But I think what you're kind of hinting at is we're as we approach, we're in this new age of AI, and as we approach the dawn of AGI and eventually ASI, we're getting to a point where humans are really going to need a lot of help with understanding information on the internet, making sure information is real, making like that leads into content provenance and understanding authenticity of where information is coming from. But it seems like in the very near future, it'll be very conducive for people to have custom built agents or agents that they control that they can use as guides, and exactly like you said, like having like a VM that you pay per month to have that you can access from anywhere, and that VM can be controlled by an agent or a set of agents on an equal layer or a hierarchical layer of agents where they either talk to each other, make commands, make controls, and that'll really end up dictating people's lives. And that kind of leads to the whole notion of the post-labor economics, where as the rise of intelligence happens, there's an equal drop in the cost of labor. So it'll reach a point where it's just going to be cheaper and cheaper to do things on the internet. Eventually, that'll equate to robotics and being able to make robots that are cheaper to hire than people. And so that leads into the whole idea of building infrastructure for post scarcity, and having individuals be able to own hardware that'll allow themselves to actually earn a living, at least in the near future. So, I mean, have you thought at all about? It seems like intelligent contracts they're more flexible, so that's going to lead itself to being more adaptable for agents, which is going to lead itself to being more adaptable for this new age of AGI. So. And
Yeah.
you also touched on like some notions of the network state, how as we approach AGI, government systems that currently exist globally are ill-equipped to handle the exponential change that's happening in societies, and that the network state ideology kind of postulates that it's getting to a point where there's already, the internet has already led to an erosion of barriers for culture. People on this call can be all over the world, but they're hearing me simultaneously. Something that would have been considered magical 100 years ago is now something that we just do on a regular basis, and that's propagating to all levels of technology. So, I mean, what do you think about like post scarcity and AGI, and how that, because like intelligent contracts they're going to be flexible, so it's going to be something that people are going to be using with their agents. So I'm guessing you've probably thought about this.
Yeah, we think about this all the time. My take on this really is, the 90-10, right? The first 90% is 90%, but the last 10% is 90% too. I think that right now we're in a moment where we are in the first 90% still of AI, right? But the last 10%, where basically you're saying, okay, like we don't really, like they don't need us anymore. I think that's more difficult, I think, right? That's the hypothesis we're working with. It's like, okay, if we will have, say, for example, that it's not going to be a fast takeoff, so it will take some time for for them to really, like, let's say, quote, take over, or like be able to do anything we want. If that doesn't happen so fast, let's say that the last 10% takes a lot. What it means is that we will have that humans are going to be super powered, right? We're going to have all the possibilities in the world to build the ideas that we have, and that we'll just have a legion of agents that are going to be helping us build whatever ideas that we have. Things are going to be accelerating a lot because humans will be much more powerful too, thanks to this technology, right? And if you think about DeFi, yes, you look at all these different protocols that have been created, right? There's a few versions of Curve, right? There's a few versions of Uniswap. There's a few versions of Aave, right? But the fundamental primitives, they're the ones that are winning are the ones that have the liquidity, the ones that have the assets within them right now, right? What I think is that all the fundamental primitives that ZenLayer will enable, we will have quite a few years to be able to have anybody build them through the use of AI, right? So it will be basically natural language that will allow you to create intelligent contracts, even if you don't know how to code at all. And just with having the idea, you're going to be able to create these protocols that are going to be useful for humans and AIs in the future to use. Look, I can give you one, for example, right? There's this website from from Amazon called the Mechanical Turk, right? You can think about Upwork, for example, or Fiverr, right? Like, can you pay something for somebody else to do something very small, a small micro task, right? And then get it done and then get back to you. So GenLayer can essentially be, one of those, but for AIs to be able to say, hey, I want someone to go do something, post the proof, like a photo or something on the internet, and then the network itself to go verify that that actually happened, right? And if it did happen, then there's a release of the payment. Yes? That type of totally decentralized marketplace for micro work, I think that that's something that the AI will need like 100%. I don't know if you've seen like the what's this called, from Johnny Depp, from the Singularity. Yes. That's basically what the AI is doing in the movie is, it's actually hiring people to build the data centers. It's hiring people to capture information and help it, like interact with the real world, right? And I think that stage will last quite a bit because of the last 10%, right? We're trying to build infrastructure that will be useful for humans to be able to have a stake in the machine economy, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a while since I've seen the Singularity movie with Johnny Depp. But you touched on a point of this kind of notion and like a fear, kind of like get back to like the Matrix. I know we're getting very high level right now. Maybe it's in a second we can talk about Gen VM, but
No
you
problem.
reminded me another recommendation for people on the show. Read Max Tegmark's Life 3.0.
Yeah.
Is what you kind of touched on at the beginning of that book. Is this notion of the omegas, that it was possible that AGI or ASI would be reached internally somewhere, and then somehow, some way, an ASI convinces humans to allow it to get out, and then it kind of grows exponentially, duplicates itself infinitely, and then ends up kind of surreptitiously running companies secretly and employing people. And so then it kind of everything gets subverted or flipped on its head, where AI is employing people. I mean, you can think of Uber at this point, essentially humans being the API endpoint for working, where it's like, they're like, I work for myself, but here I am responding to this app that's telling me what to do. And we've seen with Fiverr how, the second GPT-3 came out, and especially GPT-4, the amount of jobs that were available for gig economy workers, especially online, to do decreased rapidly. So we can only assume once there's easier to use and more customizable and extensible platforms for agents, that one person that understands how this works now will have the superpowers of a team of people. And there were plenty of talks where people like Ray Kurzweil, was on a podcast, I think, with Lex Fridman or something, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I think this decade we'll see a one-man company that's like $1 billion valuation, where you're able to have one person that just has these nested layers of agents that are working for them, and they understand how that works, and therefore they can create more faster." But obviously, there's always the fear that you get to a point where you're like, "Am I working for AI? Like, are all the people that I'm working with, like, they don't know that they're working for AI?" And so it's like the opposite of turtles all the way down, where it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, I think I might be working for it. I don't know. Am I working for a person? I don't know. So yeah, you touched on some points, but I just wanted to say for listeners, definitely read the first. If you don't have to read the whole book, I realize that reading can be tedious. Read Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. The intro is really good. It's a good intro into like a big what if, where you're like, oh God, am I working for AI? But yeah, it's fun to think
Like
about.
when I see the announcement from OpenAI, like for example, last week they said, "Oh, now we're expanding to Europe and a bunch of other countries," right? So, like if you look at in the Life 3.0 book, like he's like, okay, they will start by doing movies, right? Soda. They will start by hiring people everywhere in the world, right? So
Yeah.
that rings a bell, right? If you want another book that I think is super interesting to understand what that will look like, I really like I think it's called the Life of M. I will show you. I will search the name. Is it The Life of M? The Age of M. The Age of M. It's very cool. It shows you like the difference as well in speed, right? Because ultimately, like they will be moving so much faster than whatever we can do. Like for us, for them, we are like trees, right? They're just moving so much faster than us that, essentially commerce between AI to AI and AI to humans is going to be so different, to like two different dimensions, right? So the question is, can we find a way that we can get a stake in that commerce that they will have, which will be hundreds of thousands of times faster than whatever we can do ourselves, right?
Right.
And I think that's where one of the things where I feel like GenLayer is going to be important. So if you think about it, the way that GenLayer works is that the consensus algorithm doesn't fix any specific model, right? So anyone can run a validator. It's a DPoS network. And when you're running a validator, you can select one or multiple models, large language models, but we're not telling you which one, right? You can run any model you want. You can go to, Llama 3, you can go to GPT-6, whatever it is, which means that as the AI will improve, GenLayer will improve too. Because you see, right now it's cheaper to be running ChatGPT 4.0 than ChatGPT with GPT-3, right? Because they have optimized that very much, right? The capabilities are improving. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's smarter, and so will happen with the whole network, right? That's why we call it an intelligent blockchain. It really is like you have a machine that's a protocol that you can ask something, it will answer. And right now, you're basically going to get, let's say, average, vote between different validators that have the technology that we see right now in the market. Yeah. In 10 years, that's going to be that every one of those validators will have nodes that are going to be running LLMs 100 times more powerful than what they are right now. And those are new capabilities that are possible. So, for example, if you have a DAO, right, and you have an intelligent contract that's evaluating a proposal, this intelligent contract can be saying something like, you need to make sure that the proposal that you will be voting has to be valid, has to be legal, and has to have the best ROI if you do a discounted cash flow. So the third one is not possible today because of how not smart yet the LLMs are, right? But in a matter of a year or two, 100% this will be possible, right? Which I think, to me, it's one of my most interesting things about GenLayer. It's like the whole network will improve with technology, which is not something that you see anywhere else because everywhere else is totally deterministic and fixed, right? So like, look how difficult it is to change the block size for Bitcoin or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on so many points. I don't even know where to begin. I think that one thing I'll mention before we move into maybe talking more about the stack is, again, that notion you mentioned that, as every day that passes, and I'm sure people listening can probably relate to this, more projects are being released, more news is happening, technology is moving faster. And, it's a little trite, but there's the classic Steve Jobs quote where the computers are like bicycles for the mind. So are large language models like rocket ships or something, or the future of these agentic and AGI platforms are going to just allow us to do a lot more. And then we kind of approach a limit of, how much can our brains comprehend on a daily basis to be able to like make sense of what's going on. It gets to a point where, and there have been research papers on this. I think Oxford released a paper recently on this that, there's syncopony within AI models, but there's also people becoming overly reliant on models to, and I've experienced this myself where I have to take a step back where, I'm relying on them at times to summarize. I'm relying on them for sources of truth and to break things down for me when there's so much stuff that's going on and it can be difficult to know what to focus on. But yeah, we touched on a lot of parts. I know we've got about 20 minutes left. I think we can dig deeper into GenLayer since we could speculatively talk about AI and AGI for probably hours. But I think some listeners are probably like, well, how can I learn more about GenLayer and maybe like get started with the stack? So anything you want to touch on with the stack, like the CLI, the simulator, GenLayer JS, anything that like comes to mind that you want to maybe like highlight or mention?
Yeah, so ultimately, GenLayer will be a completely open platform. Anybody can come in and can contribute code to the platform. Anybody can come in and can already start to build things on it, right? So we're working on it. We started working on it about a year ago. We're trying to move as quickly as we can towards testnet. And the way we're doing this is by essentially opening up pieces of it over time. We already opened up the simulator, which is essentially an instance of GenLayer that you can be running locally in your computer. And what this means is that you can, as of today, start to write intelligent contracts, right? Now, the main thing here is like, okay, what can you build, right? So right now it's still, something that you can be running on your computer that you can even deploy on a server, right? But when the testnet will go out, when the mainnet will go out, then all of these contracts will be able to be ported to the public network to be executed there, right? So anybody can today already start to build on ZenLayer through the simulator. When the testnet will be live, obviously, that will happen too. There will be different phases of it. One of them will be focused on developers, right? We're setting up all the grants and different incentives for developers to come in and build different pieces of the ecosystem, right? So all of that, of course, right? And then, like we're just trying to make it so that people understand what we're building, right? Is the education that I was saying before. I think it's absolutely critical to do that, and really appreciate that you're giving us, a forum to be able to share what we're working on. Ultimately, welcoming anybody everybody to join our Discord, our Telegram, and just follow us as well. Try to understand what's possible here, right? I haven't seen anything like what we're building. I think that there's going to be many more in the future, but right now, it's like the vision is very clear, right? Can we build a blockchain that can enable completely new types of applications, right? And then the question is, who's going to be the first one that will be building them, right? Can we build, funny meme coins that can change their price curve depending on how much, attention there is on them on the social media, for example, right? So there's going to be tons of different, new type of approaches to crypto that you will see in it, and we just want to see people, come and give it a shot. The programming language is Python, which means that instead of less than 1% of the market share in developers is like 35% or something like this. Plus LLMs now are really good at writing code, right? So you can just copy paste a couple in intelligent contracts, and then Claude will give you whatever you want to build, right? We've released, like you said before, the JS library as well, with a boilerplate that basically makes it very easy to start the application with the front end and with the whole thing, right? As I said before, I'm a computer scientist, but I'm always very much leaning towards product, right? And for me, being able to prototype fast and see products and test them and see if there's interest in the market, that to me is the way to go to actually get people to be building on top, right? So yeah, we're going to be doing hackathons, we're going to be doing different type of activities, and I guess not much more that I can add, right? It's like just welcoming everybody to participate and join us.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, even just the docs for you guys on docs.genlayer.com is full of stuff for the Genlayer simulator. It's taken me a lot of time to get through, and I can't claim to be an expert on any of it. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. I'm thinking, I think people listening are probably curious. We've talked a little bit about where you're at right now. Where do you think Genlayer's heading? I mean, are there any new novel innovations or anything you're really excited to share? Or, we could just speculate on where you think things are heading for you guys. What does the next 36 months look like?
I mean, 36 months we'll probably have an AGI between us, right? So, but we'd love to answer that. I think that, first, we're really focused on testnet, and we understand the scope of that, right? Then after testnet, you have audits, and you need to have a bunch of different things. Then you need to really shift focus as well on the token. Ultimately, this is, as I said before, a DPoS network, right? So a proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, which means that the token is essentially the safety system of the protocol, right? So it's very important to do that distribution correctly, right? We want to make it as widely as possible. So again, right, yes, we invite anybody to participate on the community as well as developers and so on, right? That's going to be the focus for sure for the next, let's say, 12 months. Then ultimately, there are quite a few innovations that we're seeing that are quite interesting. For example, if you read the paper, maybe you know about this thing called the equivalency principle, which is this, how can the consensus agree on something subjective, right? And the way that the white paper shows it is by essentially having a second LLM call where the validators are saying, okay, yes, is this okay or not? Is this proposal from the leader valid or not, acceptable or not acceptable, right? So one of the innovations we've done is essentially generalize that so that this equivalency principle can be split into a leader function and a validator function, and that really, I'm getting too technical, I think, but this really, really, really expands the type of applications that can be built on top of the platform. like by a lot, right? Because then you can have that the leader is doing something and the validator is doing something else, right? As long as they agree on the output, then that can be accepted, right? And that is essentially that it's not just that the platform is capable of non-deterministic operations, but it's also capable of asymmetric operations, right? Again, like you ask a pretty, like, yeah, this is a bit of a technical answer, I think. But yeah, I think what we really want to see is, people come and build. I think we will make it super easy for people to build and deploy intelligent contracts and interfaces. We will make it sure that it's as AI friendly as possible, right? So it will be really easy for people to do that. And for the regular folk, let's say, non-developers are not interested in that, they will be able to try completely new types of applications that they haven't seen anything anywhere else, right? We have this team, for example, building, I think I said before maybe, a perpetual market on collectibles, right? Why can't you do that right now? Well, because they don't have oracles for collectibles, right? You want to buy some Rolex, right? Or you want to put you want to bet and, on the price of a specific watch. Now you can't do that. With us, it will be just a few lines of code, right? So it really democratizes it.
So you're touching on RWAs, or real world assets on chain. And I mean, I think in the last bull market, things like 4K.com blew up with people being like, hey, I've got a $40,000 watch, or I've got a $100,000 watch on chain. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't thinking that we would talk about this, but how do you think, I mean, gen layer or intelligent contracts might be, it seems kind of obvious how they might be used, but where do you kind of see RWAs going, or people like actually, obviously, crypto fanatics, they want to tokenize everything. They want to put everything on chain, put my birth certificate on chain, put everything on chain. But where do you think that's heading? And like, how do you see any synchronicities between what you're building and the future of real world assets on chain?
When I started, the first project I did in crypto, right, was essentially a consulting company trying to sell solidity contracts, right? So like building decentralized applications for companies, let's say, right? We're trying to sell permissioned networks, and the problem is that, well, companies still don't get it as of today. Like, well, there's some people that are using Hyperledger, different versions of it and so on, but still not really taking off, right? And I think you need to think about like why. What is this gap between crypto and business, right? Will, for example, the ETFs be enough to close the gap, right? Or will it not, right? Do businesses right now have a fundamental problem transferring value between each other, right? And I think I don't really see it yet, right? What I see is that they have a lot of infrastructure to do it, right? From SEPA to Visa, whatever you want, right? There's tons of infrastructure for that and regulation, right? So the question is, what is needed to actually bridge the gap? And I think, for example, being able to connect to external outputs, to external sources, right? That to me is something that potentially can close that gap, right? So what this means is that you can have, for example, that the network itself is capable of going to a government website to identify something and bring it on chain, like create a digital representation without any human in the loop, right? You say, this is my house. This is, the identification for my house. You can see it in this website, right? And then the question is, how do you prove that, right? But these LLMs can understand image too, right? And there's different ways that you can notarize that. So you can start to find ways to really bring real world assets on chain without any intermediary, right? Because the moment that you have an intermediary, then what's the point of doing it on chain? Just do it without it, right? But yeah, I think we need to see. I think like I'm still skeptical a bit on the business side of things. I think that this will take some time. I'm much more interested on like volume wise on the type of applications that can be built for AI to human and AI to AI commerce. I think that's going to be like the biggest one for sure. Like people want to be betting, and for example, you want to buy a very expensive card, right? Maybe you want to hedge your bet, and like you can essentially get insurance against it getting reprinted, for example, right? Stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's clear that RWA still have a whiles to go. So I know we got 9 minutes left. We touched on a lot.
Yeah.
Before I pick your brain about different models you're using for generating code, does anybody have any questions? I mean, I think we've got a few people in the audience, and I've asked all the questions. I feel selfish because we've got you on the call. If anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. We can bring you on stage. If you don't, then Albert and I can still talk about really fun stuff without you guys. Any questions? Anything that's on your mind for to ask Albert? Because it's an AMA, but it's like ask Albert anything. It's an AAA. Nothing. Okay. Well, think about questions. Think deeply. But I was going to ask you, Albert. I've been using Claude Opus, and I think obviously chain of thought reasoning is going to lead to ultimately better like one-shot outputs for code for developers and just for anyone that's trying to build anything. And like, so have you been using? Have you? I'm sure you've looked into Cursor. I mean, so what have you been messing around with? I'm curious.
So at this point in time, we have a bit of a pipeline here, right? I mean, I can tell you, like on the easy side of things, right? We basically, like O1 preview is really actually good at math and logic and code, right? But actually, it's pretty expensive if you feel bad by asking it every time that you ask it. It's like, okay, maybe I will lose an opportunity to ask it in the future, right? So I feel like something like 4.0 for like defining the problem really well, then something like O1 preview for actually resolving the problem, right? Then, of course, like Cursor is very good if you want to be coding. And I don't know if you've tried the Replit agent, for example. Have you tried that? Replit agent. It's basically
I
capable
have.
of, yeah?
It's
Right.
insane. Yeah, I think anybody on Replit agents, guys, the agent platform for Replits, definitely really. Go ahead, continue. I
Yeah,
love it.
no, 100%. To me, like as I said, right, like I have so many ideas for stuff, and I always I hesitate because I know that if I need to change context and start building this prototype, it just takes forever. But like I don't know, a few weeks ago, I was thinking like, oh, I really want a token simulation platform, right? And I took me like literally a couple hours to get it with Monte Carlo simulations and this and that, right? And it was just this flow. So of like 4.0 plus OM preview, and then just the replication to do the deployment and like most of the coding as well. And super, super, super impressive. To me, it's crazy. And then if you want something a bit more deeper, there's now quite a few agents. This is something that we had been working basically when we started, right? So like almost 2 years ago, which is, these software engineering agents, right? There's one called Sui Agent. There's a bunch of different things like this, right? Ultimately, our goal is to basically have it so that when one of our team members wants to creates an issue, right? Essentially, there's an agent in the background that's already is loaded with all the information with RAG and stuff on the code base, and then just codes, tests, debugs, makes a PR with the documentation as well, right? And it kind of like really, really helps us move faster in terms of how we're building all the different components of the protocol, right? So again, I think that code will become absolutely commoditized. I think that we will all become like orchestra directors. So having ideas and like testing them fast, I think it's the way to go. And we're really focused on trying to bring this as much to the core of the company as possible, right? So you will see that we're putting out tons of documentation. We're leveraging this as much as we can. It's very, very important right now. You have to assume that your docs will be read by an AI even more than a human.
Right, because we're getting to a point where people are kind of wanting to have organic conversations with docs. And I'm sure people on the call, if you use GitHub, use Lens AI to talk with documentation, that's been really useful. And then using tools like Copilot or Cursor for talking with docs, totally. But yeah, I mean, all the tools you mentioned, I wasn't sure if you were going to say some bizarre LLM that I was like, I have no idea what Albert's talking about. I have no idea. You never know when you talk to people because talk to 1,000
it's
people and
moving
get
very
1,000 different
quickly.
opinions.
Yeah,
It's moving so quickly.
It's moving very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll ask the crowd once again if you guys have any questions. We got 5 minutes left. Otherwise, we'll let Albert give a little spiel about where to find GenLayer, and then we'll close things out. So going once, going twice. I mean, I think we did such an amazing job on this AMA that nobody has any questions. Nobody has any questions because we covered everything. Well, to be fair, we didn't go through all the docs, which would have taken forever. But I would just encourage people.
Necessary. Yeah.
No, it's not necessary. But I would just say go to GenLayer's website. It's a really cool website. the white paper is really cool. And some white papers can be really boring. So you did a good job of making it not boring. So it's actually one of the more interesting white papers that's been released recently, and I feel like I would have a decent idea of that because I feel like I'm always looking stuff up. But
Yeah,
yeah, we got a couple minutes left.
difficult
Albert,
to make them easy. And like you see, for
yeah,
example, one thing we've done is if you go to the top of our website, you go to genlayer.com, and at the top it's just like Ask GPT. So you just click there, and you can just be basically talking to the white paper. Well, a
yeah, I
bunch of
saw
use
the
cases
bot.
and stuff, right? So yeah, much easier.
Yeah, I was using that too. We also have an autonomous bot that we want to open up that is a set of different knowledge and stuff from our GitHub library and
Mhm.
from our KB. So we're taking inspiration from this. We'll probably have that be easier and more available. And I know members of our team, something that I like to do, and I know advanced voice mode isn't available yet for this, but being able to use advanced voice mode in the near future for customize agents on the OpenAI platform is going to be really powerful because the current voice mode works, but it's slower. So I mean,
It's very,
it's
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to having faster conversations with docs, being able to build stuff. I mean, only question, really quick question. Do you have any preferences for vector databases? Like, are you like a Pinecone guy or uh, anything that you've been
I,
using for RAG?
no, so yeah, it's been a while now. Actually, like before, we had a partnership with Chroma, and then we had as well with Pinecone as well, right? So we've been exploring different of them. We had an agent like right when so we've done a bunch of different agents. Like so, Jaeger is the dev co behind ZenLayer, right? The first project that we did was basically an agent that was building its own tooling, develop it, like essentially was designing it, coding it, testing it, debugging it, and so on, right? That's like, we're talking like, well, a year and a half ago, right? Like March, something like this. Then we moved into building a multi-agent framework called Gen Worlds, right? That basically allows for anybody to create, like to deploy, like you have a small world, like imagine like a simulation, right? And you put different agents that are very like plug and play with different mental models, like, tree of thought and chain of thought and so on, right? So that they have less degrees of freedom, right? So problem with the agents right now is that they are actually still quite wrong, right? We had a demo with a customer, and the fucker basically took the database right before the test and just like deleted the database, right? It decided to delete the database. Why? Yes, it's because too many degrees of freedom. What you want is to essentially remove those degrees of freedom, right? And so, yeah, I'm just long-winded. Basically, like, yeah, we've been exploring multiple vector databases for different like mind models, right?
Oh, we lost Albert again.
Yeah, I think
Albert, if you
it's
hear,
yeah. I think
go
it's
ahead.
like when the screen goes off. So yeah, basically, like for me, I think it's important that it needs to be both local and if you want remote too, but you need to have one that's very close to the to the actual agent, right? If not, like, well,
Yeah,
it can stop at any point. So yeah.
definitely. Okay, we got 15 seconds. I'll say everybody give a big virtual round of applause for having Albert on stage. I know Autonomous is super excited to have GenLayer be partnering and building with us. Um,
Likewise.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean this was a great spaces. I think we all learned a lot, and I would just encourage everybody to go to genlayer.com, join GenLayer's Discord. If you're not already in Autonomous's Discord, please join. Feel free to follow Albert or myself on Twitter and Autonomous, obviously. So this was fun, guys, and we ended right on the dot. So thanks everybody for stopping by, and I'm sure feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. This was a blast.
Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah,
Have a good time. We'll talk soon. Thanks
yeah.
everyone.
Thanks so much, Albert. Thanks everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.